Greetings, loves. It is I, Tactical Girlfriend. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody's doing well. I apologize, it's been a minute since I've made a video. I had a fever, surgical recovery, COVID, and then food poisoning, all back to back to back. Really rotten patch of bad luck there, but I'm back. So to all my haters out there, I'm sorry. Can't be stopped that easily, and what doesn't kill me only makes me stronger. So I decided today, what better way to get back into it than to placate all my AK weirdos out there. I'm not really much of an AK girl these days, but I decided that AK content is kind of important, and there's a lot of people that shoot them. So I've made plenty of other cleaning videos, so why not talk about how to clean the AK? So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, before we get to brass and tacks here, I know some of you are probably like, Tactical Girlfriend, you actually clean your AK? That's pretty weird. And yeah, to some of you that might be a little strange. It's a very well-proven design. It's very reliable. There's very few things that stop it from running. And honestly, if it's well designed, you generally can run these things dry if you really want to. It's just not advised. Every single firearm needs maintenance. Yes, even the AK. So long as it's well lubricated and you don't have a lot of stuff like corrosion and gunk building up in there, you're probably going to be okay. AKs are extremely robust, but they still do technically need some maintenance from time to time, just not very much. So I say periodically clean your AK maybe every 1,000 rounds if you really want to. You could probably take it much further than that as long as it's a quality rifle, but in general, that's kind of a good guideline for me. I clean my AK much more than that, honestly, but you don't need to. I just really am extremely strict about my rifle cleaning regimen, and yeah, you do you, no judgment there, but every once in a while I would say you should be taking care of your rifle so that it can take care of you. Another pertinent point for a lot of folks out there is knowing whether or not you're shooting corrosive ammo. A lot of AK users are shooting surplus corrosive ammo, and that's fine, but understand that that means a very different kind of maintenance approach for your rifle. Generally, as long as you are shooting corrosive ammo, you should be cleaning your rifle every single time you shoot it. Furthermore, after you're done at the range, I generally recommend pouring a bottle of water down the barrel, through the chamber, and into the receiver, through all the works of the gun, rinsing out all those corrosive salts that have been left behind because they do corrode very quickly. Once you've rinsed everything out, make sure that you disassemble the rifle and let it dry. Don't let anything just sit there wet because that will also contribute to corrosion. And then proceed to actually clean your rifle once you get home. Okay, with a little bit of Hollywood magic here, I've got my top-down view on my workbench. We can now start to clean, but first, let's talk about what we're using to clean with today. First things first, we got some gloves. Don't be gross. Rifles have all sorts of nasty things in them left over from shooting, and then using all the weird chemicals that you're going to be using to clean it with is also not going to be great for you to absorb through your skin. So make sure that you've got gloves. Okay, next we're going to talk about our cleaning products. I'm going to be using the Slip 2000 gun lube. It's a really good CLP. I've been using that stuff for years. I have nothing but great things to say about it. There's a lot of snake oil out there, but honestly, Slip 2000, in my experience, is very solid and some of the best that I've ever used in general for their cleaning products. If you do need to go a step up, there is the EWL. That stuff is good for higher volumes of fire, more prolonged usage, and beyond that, they also make the EWL 30, which is a thicker lubricant, lasts longer. If you are shooting 3,000 to 4,000 rounds in between cleaning cycles, this stuff is going to be kind of the key for a longer period in between those cleaning cycles. I personally am just going to stick with the standard gun lube because I'm using a normal maintenance cycle and I shoot my rifle like a pretty normal person, even though I'm anything but that. Beyond that, I also have the EWG Extreme Weapons Grease, also from Slip 2000. Going to be putting that on the higher pressure contact points inside the system, just to make sure everything is moving around in there smoothly and it doesn't wear off and cook off. Grease is really, really good for rifles, AR-15s as well, and especially. So these are all great products. I've been using Slip 2000 stuff for years. I have absolutely no complaints whatsoever. As far as weapon cleaning products go, they're one of the few out there that I feel like isn't snake oil. They actually genuinely are worth the money, even if they are a little spendy. From there, I also have my bore snake. These just make cleaning a breeze. If you have any sort of long weapon whatsoever, always, always, always please get an appropriate bore snake for it. It's just going to make your life so much easier, and I've been using this thing for years and it's still in great condition, so they really don't go bad. Add these to your kit, you will not regret it. Next, I've got my brushes. I've got my brass brush here to scrub away on any stubborn surfaces that have buildup. This will help remove any of that, especially on the piston. It's very handy. Then I've got my standard brush. Whenever I'm cleaning, just use this to brush away anything else. I've also got this plastic dental pick here. This will help me move patches around into hard to reach areas. Speaking of which, I got a bunch of cleaning patches. Also got my Q-tips, just a big old pile there. Those are also useful for similar purposes. I've also got my cleaning rods here, one with a 12 gauge brass brush. That'll be for the gas tube. And then I've got my other cleaning rod. This just has a loop for the patches to go into. Also got a wad of paper towels. These are just generally good to have around, of course. And then I've got a lens cloth to clean my optic with. That will be really useful. You always want to keep those optics as clear as you can get them, of course. That's pretty self-explanatory. Finally, I've got my trusty battery tester. One little note here, most AKs do come with a cleaning rod. I actually removed mine. If you do have a cleaning rod on your rifle, please do not use it for cleaning. I know it sounds very counterintuitive, but they usually are made out of steel and they will scratch your barrel. They will wear down chrome lining if you have it. Generally, you're just all around way better off using something made out of brass if you want to use a cleaning rod, or, you know, just use the bore snake like I do. Both of those are going to be a much more gentle and better way to preserve the life of your barrel while you're cleaning. Okay, now before we actually start cleaning, we need to do a safety check, of course, make sure the weapon is clear. Source of feed has been removed, there is no magazine. Put the safety down, pull the bolt back, make sure that there is nothing in that chamber. Looks good, can reset that. And now we are actually ready to clean. So let's start with disassembly first. First thing I'm gonna do is take the weapon off of safe again. I'm gonna push the button for the dust cover in, then I'm gonna simply remove it. Sorry, this is super awkward to do it from this angle. There we go. Now, then gonna push the recoil spring in and then pull it out. Put that to the side. Then we can pull the bolt carrier group back. We've got our bolts and our piston all together here. You can simply push the bolt back and rotate it and then forward again, and it is removed from its channel. We can also put those aside, and we will get to those here shortly. Now, inside this SLR-104FR, basically an AK-74M pattern rifle, I do have my cleaning kit in the buttstock here. I do want to remove that because what I want to do is use this as a wrench to remove the gas tube. I do this by rotating the lock here. Let's give it a good little rotation there. And then from there, we're going to kind of wrestle with this a little bit. Yours might be a little stiffer than mine, or a little less stiff. They're all kind of just built different. And there we go, gas tube is removed. Now what I want to do next is take my 12 gauge brass brush and just kind of gently brush out all the dust out from the gas tube and its attaching ends. So I'll go from here at this gas port and just kind of rotate it a little bit just to loosen things up. Then I'm going to move to my gas tube. Just kind of brush inside as best as I can. This doesn't have to be done very often, but I do like to do this maybe every 1,000 rounds or so, just to make sure that there's no buildup in there. Generally, pressures and everything should clean this thing out pretty regularly. It shouldn't be a big deal, but it is nice to just make sure that I'm keeping this thing in tip-top shape. I'm also going to want to get the trunnion here, just gently give it a little bit of a scrub, and that should be pretty good. So I got most of that out. Next, I'm going to take a cleaning patch and just kind of run this through the tube just to try to collect some of that extra dust that we just loosened up, all that carbon buildup that's been shot through the gas tube. Do the same for the trunnion as well. Now when you're doing this, you do need to make absolutely sure that you're doing all of this dry. Don't put any sort of solvent or CLP or oil on this cleaning patch, on your brush or anything. Keep everything dry because the last thing you need is for oil to remain behind and have a wet surface, which encourages buildup. That's exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do here. We're just simply trying to loosen up any buildup that might have been there. Everything eventually does just get shot through into the receiver anyway when you're using the piston. That's just the nature of this system, so again, I can't stress enough. Gentle brushing, gentle wiping, nothing else. That's all you need to do for this part. Next thing I want to do is to remove the muzzle brake here. So basically the way this works is that you can simply just get any simple item to press down this plunger here. And I'm just gonna rotate this. It's gonna rotate once, you're gonna hear a click. Press it down again. Rotate again. Finally, this should screw completely off. Put the muzzle brake to the side. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bore snake. And I'm simply going to apply some of the gun lube onto both ends. Be pretty generous in this phase here because I'm just trying to run this down the barrel and just get things nice and loosened up. Just make sure you got both sides here. That's good enough. Alright, once your bore snake is lubricated, you're just simply going to run the weighted end through the chamber, let it fall through until you see it poking out of the other end of the barrel near the crown. And once you see that, you're then just going to simply pull it right on through, making sure that you're getting everything in there nice and wet so that the solvent can do its thing. This is technically a 5.56 bore snake, but it does work on 5.45. This is a little tight, but that did it. Okay, now that the barrel is marinating, I'm then going to just simply do the same thing with the rest of this. Get some of this CLP on all the surfaces that I want to clean, let it do its thing, and then brush everything away. Now I'm going to start with a brush, and I'm going to just wet it with some of the CLP here. Then I'm just going to start with some of these parts here, such as the recoil spring. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the bolts. Do the same thing with the piston and the bolt carrier group. Furthermore, I'm going to use a Q-tip to get into the channel that houses the bolts. Make sure that's also got some of the CLP on it. Also, don't forget to get some lube on the muzzle device. Next, I'm going to run a patch through the interior of the dust cover. This part stays actually fairly clean. It doesn't really need very much, but from time to time I do like to make sure that I'm also getting this too. And finally, I'm going to run a wet patch through the interior of the receiver utilizing my handy dandy plastic dental pick. One thing to note, you're also going to want to get under the hammer here. You definitely don't want to just let this hammer fly forward on its own, so put your hand in front of it. Make sure the safety is off, of course. Catch it and then release it gently. Then go behind and just get that area right behind the trigger assembly. We also don't want to forget the barrel crown here. Just get a little bit of CLP on there as well with a brush. And that's basically it. You're just trying to get all the CLP on all the surfaces that you're trying to clean. Let it all soak in, loosen up all that grit and grime, and then you're finally going to start to scrub and wipe everything down. Now I do want to take my brass brush and get to work here at the very end of the piston, because that's where a lot of the buildup occurs. Doesn't have to be perfect. Honestly, these things can just gather just about any amount of gunk that you can possibly throw at them, and they should continue to work, but I do like to maintain them as best as I can. Another part that definitely can use a brass brush is going to be your crown. That is also the other spot that is going to have a lot of buildup. Okay, now I can move on to my standard brush and just brush around in the receiver, make sure everything has been well scrubbed there. Push the trigger back. That's basically it. Then I'm going to do the same again for the bolts. Just continuing to try to loosen up anything that has remained since the last brushing. Recoil spring. Piston. Dust cover again. Finally, I'm going to just brush off the muzzle device again. And that's it. Next, I'm going to then start to wipe all my parts down. You can use a paper towel, you can use a cleaning patch on this. I'm actually going to use both. Start with a paper towel on the muzzle device. That's usually pretty sufficient. Because it is a muzzle device, you definitely want to make sure that you are drying the inside out so that it also doesn't collect a lot of buildup. I just kind of like to wad towels into here and just shove them in until they're dry. Then going to dry my dust cover. Start to do the same for the piston here. Use a Q-tip here to soak up anything that's in that channel there for the bolts. Also, of course, do the same for the bolts. Definitely want to make sure that your bolt face is especially nice and dry. Q-tip is great for that, as well as getting into any other nook and crannies here that we did not get with a paper towel. Great. Then I'm going to dry off the recoil spring as best as I can. Then I'm going to run my bore snake through the barrel one more time here. Just going to apply a little bit of lube on both ends again, just a bit less this time. Don't need it to be soaking wet, just need a little bit to protect the surface. Just a few drops on the tail end and the front end of that. Same exact process. I'm going to put the weighted end through the chamber, guide it through. And finally, just pull the whole thing through. Okay, now that we're completely done with the barrel, I'm then going to just simply mop up the receiver internally with a patch and my plastic dental pick here. Once again, you're going to want to gently release that hammer. So pull the trigger with your hand in the way of it, and let it sit there, and mop up behind it. After that, I'm then going to do the same for the crown of the barrel, just make sure it's nice and dry, as best as I can do right now. Alright, we've had everything CLP'd, we've had everything scrubbed, and everything mopped up. It's finally time to start reassembling the rifle, and then lubricating it. First, I'm going to put the muzzle device back on. Just the same exact opposite procedure. Rotate it until you hear a click. Push that plunger in. And then do one more click. There we go. Then going to reinstall the gas tube. Might take a little finagling, but should go right into place like that. Then going to use my cleaning kit again to use this slot here as a lever to attach to the release lever here so I can wrench it down and lock that gas tube back into place. Reattach my weapon light there. Now we can move back here to the receiver. This is where we're going to start to actually lubricate things with the grease. So I'm going to take my grease, everything aside here, and focus on the bolts and the bolt carrier / piston. I'm then going to carefully look at my bolt here. Just look at these lugs and the contact points. Get some grease on there. You don't need to use too much. Just enough to see those wear points and get some grease on them. And we're just going to spread this around once we feel happy with that. Simply just use your gloved finger here. That's all you really need, nothing fancy. Can use a Q-tip, of course. Again, do not get the bolt face wet here. We want to keep that thing dry. You put a thin layer of grease on the stem here. And then all you do is you take your bolt carrier group, insert your bolts, and what you're going to want to do is insert it all the way, rotate it so that you lock the lug that goes into the channel there. The main lug here on the bottom should line up here, keep it in the extended position. We're also going to want to get some grease on the contact points behind the hammer here. First thing you need to do is, again, put your hand in front of the hammer, pull the trigger, release the hammer, let it hit your hand, then just gently ride it forward so that you don't snap it forward into that little bar in the middle of the receiver and cause unnecessary wear. Then I'm just going to add a little bit of grease to a Q-tip here. You don't need very much, just a tiny bit. And basically what I'm trying to do is get a little bit of grease here where the hammer locks back on this contact hook that holds the hammer down. And then I'm also going to do exactly the same thing on the top lip here where it comes in contact with a hammer. And that's basically it. And then you simply just push the hammer back down again. It's in place. Also going to want to put some CLP onto the rails where the bolt carrier group rides around on. You can simply use a Q-tip here and just get it nice and soaking wet with your CLP. Don't need very much, just get the top of these rails. Apply some more. Get some onto the top internal rails. And that's basically it. Doesn't need much. Okay, finally you can start to put everything together. So grab your bolt carrier group / piston. Make sure that the bolt is all the way forward here. And then put the piston into the gas tube. And then just make sure that the bolt carrier group is riding flush along the rails on your receiver. Shove the whole thing forward. Next, you're going to take your recoil spring, put that into the bolt carrier group, push it forward, and then lock those rails into the rails on the receiver, like that. Finally, you're going to grab your dust cover, insert the front lips into the trunnion, and then you're just going to put downward pressure on the rear while also applying a little bit of forward pressure so it stays in place. And it's locked in place. Make sure that your dust cover button there is sticking out. You should be good. Alright, we're going to also charge the bolt a bunch of times to just make sure that the grease has spread across the surfaces as evenly as it can. Great. Okay, finally we want to do a functions check. Safety is off, charge the bolt, then pull the trigger, goes click, hold the trigger down one more time, release, resets, click. Great. Safety back on. We are officially done cleaning the rifle itself. We just simply want to wipe everything off, and in fact what I really like to do is also make sure that my weapon light is nice and clean on the lens, because that does acquire some buildup over time on the lens, and you want to get that to be as bright as you can get it. And the rest, simply front to back, wipe it off with a paper towel, make sure everything is nice and dry. You just don't have a bunch of oil dripping off this thing, because that's really gross. Okay, I know this is super niche, but I also do want to clean my bayonet because I did shoot this gun with my bayonet on it, and it does have some carbon on the blade itself. So I'm just going to put a little bit of CLP on a paper towel. Nothing crazy here. And just give that a good wipe down. Alright, that's pretty silly, but there's a clean bayonet. Okay, at this juncture I do want to clean the lenses on the optic. I'm actually going to remove my gloves here, because I don't want to get any of the stuff that I've collected on my gloves on my optic. It should be as dry and clean as possible. So basically I'm just going to fog up each end of the lenses with my breath. I'm going to wipe down with a lens cloth. Other side. Give it a good inspection, look through it, looks great. I'm also going to want to check the battery on my optic and make sure that it's got enough charge. And yeah, it's, you know, a little less than 50% here. It probably could use a replacing in the near future. and that's okay. I will just take it out to another range trip or two and just make sure that I replace it afterwards. Close it back up, put the bikini cover on, put it away. All right, optic is good to go. Now, if you do want some extra credit, you can clean your magazines. You don't have to do it very often, but if you reuse these a lot, you probably eventually are going to need to. I generally try to clean these about every 1,000 rounds or so. You don't need to go crazy here, but simply grab something pointy, depress the plunger on the bottom, slide the base plate back, put your finger over the end so the spring doesn't go flying out because it does have a lot of tension on it. Gently let it out. Now you got your parts. Now, generally what I like to do is kind of just run everything mostly dry here. Just kind of scrub the base plate a little bit with your paper towel. Use a paper towel to also scrub the spring. Generally try not to get the spring wet unless it actually shows signs of rust, which it certainly shouldn't because most of these are made of things that don't rust for a good reason. And then from there, I like to put a little bit of CLP on my paper towel. And just kind of gently scrub the very top feeding bits of the internals here. Dry it off well. Again, you don't want any oil residue collecting dust and carbon needlessly here if you can avoid it. Then with a little more CLP on a paper towel, I'm going to just simply run this through the body of the magazine a few times, just shoving it through with a rod. And also, I'm going to want to make sure more than anything that I actually get the feeding lips on the magazine thoroughly cleaned, because that's going to be the main failure point here if there is one. Also get those lugs cleaned. They do collect carbon and can cause some locking issues, although that is very rare. Lastly, I'm going to run a large patch on my cleaning rod here. And I'm just going to kind of mop everything up inside and make sure it's nice and dry as best as I can get it. Again, I'm going to try to dry off those feeding lips as best as I can. Finally, I'm going to reinstall my spring and follower into the body of the magazine. Then I'm going to put the base plate back on. Make sure it's locked in place. And we have a clean magazine. And that's a clean AK. I hope this video was useful to everybody out there, whether you are an AK user or not. Maybe you just simply want to know more about cleaning rifles in general. These are all just generally good practices to know about, so if you did find this video helpful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell too. Also, if you got your own methods that you want to talk about in the comments below, please chime in. We're all a community here and we all can learn from each other, so please don't be shy. As always, I also want to graciously thank everybody who has ever supported this channel on Patreon. You keep the lights on, you keep the channel afloat, and I couldn't do it without you. If you do want to go help chip in, you can always go to patreon.com/tacticalgf. The biggest contributors are named at the end of the video. And that's all the Kalashnikov cleaning I got for you today. I really appreciate you all tuning in. Please be good to each other out there, and as always, please take care. Bye!